The wind came down the mountain like something alive. It did not howl, it pressed, low and heavy, rolling through the pines and over the ridge like a weight that settled into bone. Snow followed it sideways, sharp and relentless, turning the world into a shifting wall of white. Silas Boone moved through it without hurry. His coat was thick with frost along the shoulders, his beard rimmed with ice where his breath had frozen and thawed a dozen times already. Each step landed sure-measured boots breaking through crust and powder alike with the same steady rhythm. He had been tracking elk since first light. Now the tracks were gone, buried, erased by the storm. Silas stopped near a stand of twisted pine, one gloved hand resting briefly against the trunk. He tilted his head slightly, not looking, listening. The wind carried many things, most of them noise, but sometimes something else. A shift, a break, a wrongness there. He turned slow, deliberate. Not far off the slope where the land dipped before rising again toward the higher ridge, something disturbed the snow. Not the clean line of an animal trail, not the scattered marks of falling branches. Something dragged. Something struggled. Silas stood still for a long moment. Then he changed direction. The snow deepened as he moved downhill, drifting into uneven pockets that swallowed his boots past the ankle. The wind pressed harder here, funneled between rock and tree, carrying fine ice that stung against his face like sand. He saw it then. A shape, low, half-buried, not moving. He didn't rush. Men who rushed in weather like this didn't last long. But his steps shortened, tightened. He reached the shape and stopped. A woman, curled into herself in the snow coat, stiff with frost-dark hair frozen in strands against her cheek. One arm wrapped around something beneath her. Not something. Someone. A child. Silas's jaw tightened once. He crouched down. The woman's face was pale. Not the clean pale of winter, but the grey, hollow shade of a body that had been too long in the cold. Her lips were parted slightly, breath so faint it barely showed. But she was alive. Barely. The child moved first. A small shift under the woman's arm, a mittened hand pushing weakly against the snow. Then a face turned upward, wide eyes rimmed red from wind and cold. The girl couldn't have been more than 5. She looked at him like she didn't know whether to be afraid or relieved. "Mama won't wake up," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, thin, almost carried away by the wind before it reached him. Silas didn't answer right away. His eyes moved over them both. The woman's coat worn not built for mountain cold. The child's boots too small, laces mismatched. No proper gear, no supplies visible, no horse. No reason they should be here, no reason they should still be alive. He exhaled slowly through his nose. This wasn't his problem. That was the first truth. He lived alone for a reason. The mountain had rules, simple ones. You survive by keeping to yourself, by not taking on weight you didn't need. 2 strangers in a storm that was weight. That was risk. That was trouble. The girl's hand reached out, not toward him, toward the woman. "Mama," she said again, softer now. "Please, wake up." Silas closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them. That was the second truth. He couldn't leave them, not like this, not in the snow, not with the child still trying to wake a woman who wasn't waking. He moved, quick now, but still controlled. He brushed snow away from the woman's face, checked her pulse at the throat. Weak, slow, but there. "Can you stand?" he asked the girl. She shook her head immediately. "No, sir." Her teeth chattered on the last word. Silas nodded once. He slid one arm beneath the woman's shoulders, the other beneath her knees. She was heavier than she looked, not from size, but from the dead weight of a body too cold to help itself. He lifted her in one smooth motion. The girl scrambled up beside him, grabbing fistfuls of his coat like it was the only solid thing left in the world. "Stay close," he said. She nodded, already pressing against his side. The wind hit them full as they turned uphill. Silas adjusted his grip on the woman, shifting her weight higher against his chest. Her head fell against his shoulder hair, cold against his neck. No response, no sound. He started back toward the ridge. Each step was slower now, measured, deliberate. The storm had thickened. Visibility dropped to barely 20 feet. Landmarks disappeared. The world reduced to white shadow and instinct. But Silas knew this mountain. He knew the angle of the slope beneath his boots, the way the wind changed near the ridge, the faint outline of rock formations buried beneath snow. He didn't need to see. He just needed to keep moving. Behind him, the girl stumbled once. He felt the tug on his coat. Didn't turn. "Keep up," he said, voice low but firm. "I am," she whispered, and she was, step by step. Small boots sinking deep, pulling free, sinking again. Her breathing came fast, uneven, but she didn't stop. Silas adjusted his pace just slightly, not enough to slow them dangerously, just enough to match her. The climb stretched. Time blurred, wind, snow, breath. The woman in his arms remained still, too still. He tightened his grip unconsciously. Not yet, not here. The ridge came into view as a darker shape through the storm. Beyond it, his cabin, another 100 yards, then 50. Then the outline of the structure appeared through the white, rough logs, low roof, smoke barely visible against the sky. Silas didn't pause. He crossed the final stretch boots, hitting the packed ground near the door with a dull, solid sound. He kicked it open. Warmth didn't rush out. Not yet. But it was warmer than the storm. That was enough. He stepped inside, turning his body to shield the woman from the wind as the door slammed shut behind them. The world went quiet. Not silent. Never silent. But the wind became a distant thing, a low pressure against the walls instead of a force trying to tear them apart. Fire burned low in the hearth coals more than flame. Silas crossed the room in 3 strides and lowered the woman onto the bed. The girl stood just inside the door, shaking now, eyes darting around the unfamiliar space. "Close it," Silas said. She turned, pushed the door harder, until the latch caught. Then she looked back at him. "What about Mama?" "She's breathing." That was all he said. But the girl nodded, like it meant everything. Silas moved quickly. More wood into the fire, sparks rising flame, catching slow, then stronger. He grabbed blankets from the chest, thick and worn but dry, and layered them over the woman. Her skin was still too cold. He stripped off his gloves, pressed his hand briefly to her cheek. No warmth. He looked at the girl. "Name?" "Lily," she said immediately. "Lily Whitlock." Her voice trembled, but she held his gaze. Silas nodded once. "Stay there." She stayed, and didn't move, didn't ask, just watched. Silas turned back to the woman. He worked without wasted motion, boots off. Outer coat removed frozen fabric stiff as wood. He hesitated only once, just a fraction, before pulling the damp layers away from her shoulders, replacing them with dry cloth and blankets. Survival didn't leave room for modesty, only results. He fed the fire again. The cabin began to change, slowly, the cold easing inch by inch, the sound of wood cracking popping, the smell of smoke settling into the air. Lily edged closer. Not too close, but closer. "Is she gonna die?" she asked. Silas didn't look at her. No. It wasn't a promise, it was a decision. Lily seemed to understand that. She nodded again, small and tight, and sank down onto the floor near the bed, pulling her knees to her chest. Silas sat beside the woman, watched, waited. Minutes passed, then more. The fire grew stronger. Heat began to reach her skin. A faint change, not much, but enough. Her breathing shifted, slight, uneven. Then a shallow gasp. Her fingers twitched beneath the blanket. Silas leaned forward, one hand braced against the edge of the bed. The woman's eyes fluttered, opened halfway, unfocused, lost. She tried to move, didn't get far. "Don't," Silas said. Her gaze found him slowly, dark eyes, confused, searching. Fear came next, sharp, immediate. She tried to pull back, but her body wouldn't answer. Where her voice broke, dry, weak. "You're inside," Silas said. "You're safe." She stared at him like she didn't believe that word existed anymore. "Lily, I'm here, Mama." The girl scrambled up, climbing onto the edge of the bed, careful but desperate all the same. "I'm here. I'm okay." The woman's hand moved, slow, unsteady. But it found the child's face, held it. Her eyes closed again, not in unconsciousness, but in something deeper, relief. Silas looked away, gave them that moment. The fire cracked behind him. Wind pressed against the walls, and for the first time that day the cabin didn't feel empty. The storm did not leave. It settled in. By nightfall, the wind pressed harder against the cabin walls, low and steady, like something testing the strength of the wood. Snow gathered along the edges of the roof, sliding in soft, heavy shifts that thudded against the ground outside. Inside, the fire held. Silas fed it twice before the woman woke again. This time, she did not startle. She opened her eyes slowly, as if the act itself required more strength than she had to spare. The fear was still there, but quieter now, distant, measured. She remembered enough. The snow, the fall, the cold, and then him. Her gaze found Silas where he sat near the hearth, one elbow resting on his knee, a tin cup held loosely in his hand. He had not removed his coat, only loosened it, as if ready to move again at any moment. She studied him the way a person studies something they do not yet understand. Not safe, not unsafe, just unknown. "Lily," she asked. Her voice was still rough but steadier. "I'm here, Mama." The girl was already beside her, as if she had never moved far. She climbed onto the edge of the bed again, small hands gripping the blanket. "I told you he helped us," Lily said, glancing briefly towards Silas like she was including him in something important. The woman's eyes flickered back to him. "Thank you," she said. Silas didn't answer right away. He set the cup down beside him, stood, crossed the room in 2 quiet steps. "Drink," he said, handing her a different cup this time. Steam rose faintly from it, broth, thin but hot. She hesitated. Not because she didn't want it, because she didn't know if she was allowed to. Silas didn't move, didn't rush her, didn't explain. He simply held the cup there until she reached for it. Her hands shook when she took it. He noticed, said nothing. She brought it to her lips carefully, as if afraid the heat might disappear if she moved too fast. The first sip made her eyes close again, but not from weakness this time. From relief. Real relief, the kind that settled somewhere deep and quiet. Lily watched her like she was watching the sun come up after a long night. "See," the girl whispered. "You're okay." The woman Clara exhaled slowly. "I am," she said. But her eyes lifted again. Back to Silas, still trying to understand him. "You found us," she said. "Yes. Why?" The question came out before she could stop it. Silas met her gaze, didn't soften, didn't harden, just answered. "You were there. That was all. No explanation, no story, no attempt to make it sound like more than it was." Clara studied him for another moment, then nodded once. As if that answer made sense. More sense than anything else might have. The night stretched long. Silas moved through it the way he moved through everything quiet, efficient without drawing attention to himself. He added wood to the fire before it needed it, set water near the bed before she asked, placed an extra blanket across Lily when the girl fell asleep curled against her mother's side. He did not sit close, but he did not leave the room. Clara noticed that, even in the spaces between sleep, even in the moments when her eyes barely opened before closing again. He was always there, not watching her, not hovering, just present, like part of the cabin itself. By morning the storm had eased but not cleared. Light filtered through the small window in muted grey, reflecting off the snow piled high outside. The world beyond the cabin still looked unreachable. Clara woke to the sound of something steady, a soft rhythm. She turned her head. Silas stood near the table, sharpening a blade with slow, even strokes. The sound of metal against stone carried gently through the room. Lily was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor, talking to the dog. Clara hadn't noticed the dog before, large, brown, lying beside the hearth with his head resting on his paws, watching Lily with calm patience. "And we came all the way from Kansas," Lily was saying, "but Mama said we couldn't stay there anymore because..." She stopped suddenly, looked up, realizing Clara's eyes were open. "Mama," she said softly. "I'm here," Clara answered. Her voice was stronger now, still thin but no longer breaking. Lily scrambled up and came to her again, climbing onto the bed with less hesitation this time. "You slept a long time," the girl said. Clara smiled faintly. "I needed to." Her gaze shifted. Silas had stopped sharpening the blade. Not turned. Just paused. Aware. She pushed herself up slightly against the pillows. The effort showed, but she didn't let it linger. "How long?" she asked. "Since yesterday afternoon?" Clara absorbed that, then nodded. "And the storm's still there." She glanced toward the window, then back at him. "I'll leave when it clears." Silas resumed sharpening the blade. The sound returned. Steady. Unchanged. "No!" Clara blinked, not expecting that. "I don't want to impose," she said quickly. "You've done enough. I won't. You're not walking anywhere." His tone didn't rise, didn't sharpen, but it ended the sentence before she could finish it. Clara's jaw tightened slightly. "I can manage," she said. Silas looked at her then. Really looked, not at her face, at her hands, still unsteady, at the way she held herself too carefully, like any wrong movement might break something inside her, at the way her strength wasn't back yet. "You can't," he said. Simple, final, no judgment in it, just fact. Clara held his gaze. For a moment, something flickered behind her eyes. Not anger, not quite. Pride. Wounded, but still standing. "I will," she said quietly. Silas set the blade down, walked over, stopped beside the bed. "Not too close. Close enough." "You couldn't stand yesterday," he said. "You barely can now." She didn't answer. "You go out there." He nodded toward the window. "You don't make it 10 minutes. Still, she didn't answer, but her fingers tightened slightly around the blanket. Silas watched that, then shifted his weight back, gave her space again. "Stay until you can walk," he said. "Not an offer, not an order, just a condition." Clara exhaled slowly. Her shoulders lowered a fraction. Not surrender, not acceptance, something in between. For how long, she asked. Silas shrugged once. "Until you don't fall over trying." Lily giggled softly at that. Clara glanced at her, then back at Silas. And for the first time, something in her expression eased. Just a little. The day unfolded slowly, different from the storm, but no less quiet. Silas worked outside when the wind allowed it, clearing snow from the door, checking the perimeter, moving like a man who trusted his routine more than the weather. Inside, Clara tried to stand. She made it 3 steps before the room tilted. Silas was there before she hit the floor, not rushing, not panicked, just present. He caught her elbow, steady, held her until the world righted itself again. She didn't look at him, didn't thank him, but she didn't pull away immediately either. That was new. "Sit," he said. "I'm fine, you're not." A pause, then she sat. Not because he told her to, but because she knew he was right. By evening the cabin had changed. Not in structure, not in space, but in feeling. There was another cup on the table, another pair of boots near the door. A small, worn cloth rabbit resting beside the bed. Lily laughed once, soft, quick, when the dog nudged her hand for attention. And Silas paused when he heard it. Just for a second. Just long enough to register the sound before continuing what he was doing. But something had shifted. Small, quiet, real. That night, Clara didn't ask again about leaving, and Silas didn't mention it. The fire burned steady, the wind eased, and somewhere between the silence and the sound of breathing in a room no longer empty, something began. Not trust, not yet, but the space where trust could grow. The second night was quieter, not because the wind had stopped, but because the cabin had learned how to hold it. The walls creaked now and then, a slow settling sound. The fire burned lower, steady and warm, throwing soft shadows that moved across the rough-cut logs like breathing. Clara lay awake longer than she meant to. Lily slept beside her, one small hand curled into the blanket, the other resting lightly against Clara's arm, as if to make sure she was still there. Clara didn't move, didn't want to wake her, didn't want to lose that small certain weight. Across the room, Silas sat near the door, not sleeping. He never seemed to sleep the way other people did. Just still, eyes half lowered, listening. She had noticed that. He listened more than he spoke, and when he spoke, it was only what needed saying. Nothing more, nothing wasted. Clara turned her head slightly, watched him. The firelight caught the edge of his face, sharp lines, weathered skin, a stillness that didn't come from calm, but from control. A man who had learned to hold himself together by holding everything else at a distance. She knew that kind of man, not exactly like him, but close enough. Men who had seen too much, lost too much, and decided silence was safer. Her fingers tightened slightly against the blanket. She hadn't meant to stay, not here, not anywhere. Stopping had never been part of the plan. Stopping meant being found. Stopping meant her breath caught. She forced it steady again. No, not tonight, she closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come easily. Morning arrived slow and grey. The storm had passed during the night, leaving the world buried under a clean, blinding white. Light reflected off every surface, pouring into the cabin through the small window. Lily woke first. She always did. Children adjusted faster, recovered faster, believed in safety faster. "Mama," she whispered, nudging her arm. Clara opened her eyes. "You're awake early." "I wasn't sleeping," Lily said. "I was listening." "To what? The quiet?" Clara smiled faintly. "That's a good thing to listen to." Lily nodded seriously, then leaned closer. Mr. Boone already went outside. Clara turned her head. The door was closed, but a faint line of light edged beneath it. Snow glare. She pushed herself up slowly this time, more careful, more aware of her limits. It still hurt, but it didn't feel like she might collapse anymore. That was something. "I'm going to stand," she said. Lily watched her carefully, like she was ready to catch her if needed. Clara swung her legs over the side of the bed, paused, then pushed up. Her knees trembled, but held. She stood there for a moment, breathing through it, then took one step, then another, slow, unsteady, but hers. "I'm doing it," Lily whispered, as if saying it too loud might break the moment. Clara let out a quiet breath. "Yes," she said. "You are." Silas came back in not long after. Snow clung to his boots and the hem of his coat. He stamped once near the door, knocking most of it loose before stepping inside fully. He saw her standing, didn't react immediately, just closed the door, set down the bundle of wood in his arms, then looked again. Properly. "You're up." "I am." Silas studied her for a second. Not impressed, not surprised, just assessing. "You're still not strong enough to leave." Clara almost smiled. "Good morning to you too." Silas moved past her toward the hearth, added wood to the fire. The flames rose. Warmth spread again. Routine. Always routine. Clara lowered herself carefully into the chair near the table. This time she didn't fall, didn't sway, just sat. Silas noticed that too. Said nothing, but he noticed. They ate in quiet, simple food, bread, broth, nothing wasted, nothing extra. Lily filled the silence easily, talking about the dog, about the snow, about how the mountains looked too big to be real. Silas answered when needed, short, clear, never dismissive, never impatient. Clara watched that, stored it. A man who spoke little, but never spoke down. That mattered. It was later when Lily stepped outside with the dog just to the edge of the porch that Clara spoke. Silas was at the table repairing a strap. She didn't ease into it, didn't soften it. She had learned long ago truth landed better when it wasn't dressed up. "I didn't get lost," she said. Silas didn't look up. "I figured. I was running." That made him pause, just slightly, from what Clara's hands folded together in her lap. Not tight, not shaking, just held. From a man who believes he owns what he can take. Silas lifted his gaze, met hers, waited. She continued, "My husband died last winter." Silas said nothing. "I thought losing him was the worst thing that could happen." A pause. It wasn't. Her voice didn't break, didn't waver. It had already done that somewhere else, some other time. "He left debts," she said. "Farm debts, supply debts, things we could have worked through." She looked down briefly, then back up. But the man holding them, Edgar Harlan, decided working through wasn't what he wanted. Silas's jaw shifted slightly. Not emotion, recognition. He knew the type. He came to the house, Clara continued. Spoke like everything was already settled, like I was just there to agree. Her fingers tightened now, just a little. He said I could keep the land, if I signed it over to him first. Silas's eyes didn't leave hers. And Lily, he asked. Clara's breath slowed, measured. He said a woman alone wasn't fit to raise a child with debt hanging over her. A long pause. He had a family in mind in town, said they'd give her a proper future. The word proper lingered, cold, empty. Silas leaned back slightly in his chair. The leather strap hung loose in his hands now. What did you do? He asked. Clara met his gaze fully. I left, no hesitation, no apology. I took what I could carry, she said. Took her. Her voice softened just for a second, then steadied again. And I kept moving. Silas nodded once, like that made sense, because it did. Why this direction, he asked. Because no one goes this way in winter, unless they have to. Silas almost smiled at that. Almost. And you thought you could make it? I thought I had to. That answer sat between them. Heavy, simple, true. Silas looked at her for a long moment, then back down at the strap in his hands. You didn't make it, he said. Clara didn't flinch. No, she said. I didn't. Silas finished the repair, set the strap aside, then stood, walked to the door, looked out over the snow-covered land. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but different. You're not going back. It wasn't a question. Clara watched him. No. Silas nodded, then added, He'll come looking? Clara didn't hesitate. Yes. Silas turned back. Their eyes met. Something passed between them then. Not fear, not yet, but understanding. Clear, direct, unavoidable. You bring trouble, he said. Clara held his gaze. I do. A pause, long enough to matter. Then I'll deal with it, Silas said, just like that. No speech, no promise, just fact. Clara blinked once, not expecting that. I didn't ask you to, she said. I know. Then why? Silas looked at her, really looked, at the exhaustion beneath her strength, at the way she held herself upright even when it cost her, at the child's boots by the door, small, worn, still damp from the snow. He exhaled once, slow, because you're here, same answer as before. But it meant more now. Clara felt that, didn't respond right away, didn't know how. So she said the only thing that mattered, I won't beg to stay. Silas nodded. Good. A beat. I don't take beggars. Clara's jaw tightened slightly. There it was. The line. The edge. But then Silas added, but you're not leaving. Silence filled the space. Not empty. Full. Clara looked at him. Something in her expression shifted. Not softened. Not broken. But steadied. As if a weight she'd been carrying alone had shifted just slightly off her shoulders. Not gone. Never gone. But shared. Just enough. Outside, Lily laughed. Clear. Bright. The sound carried through the door like something from another world. Silas turned his head toward it, just for a second. Clara saw that too. And for the first time, she understood something. This man wasn't untouched. He wasn't cold. He had simply closed the door. And without meaning to, she and her daughter had stepped inside anyway. The mountain changed after the storm. Not in shape, not in height, but in feeling. Everything was sharper now, cleaner. The sky stretched wide and pale above the ridge, the clouds broken into thin, drifting pieces. Snow lay untouched across the land, smooth as unbroken cloth reflecting the light in a way that made the world feel both endless and very quiet. Silas stood at the edge of the clearing, watching, not for anything specific, just watching. He did that more now since they arrived. Inside the cabin, Clara moved slowly but with purpose. He could hear it through the walls, the shift of wood, the faint scrape of something being set in place, the soft rhythm of someone learning a space, not taking over, not changing it, just making it livable. That was new. Silas turned. The trail that cut along the north ridge was still half buried, but passable. He checked the sky once more, then went inside. Clara looked up when he entered. She was standing at the table sleeves pushed back slightly, sorting through what little food he kept stored, not rearranging, just understanding. "Where are you going?" she asked. Silas reached for his coat. "North Ridge. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Alone, yes. A pause, then, you shouldn't go alone. Silas glanced at her, something in her tone, not fear, not control, concern, practical, measured. He considered that for a second, then shook his head. I'll be back before dark. Clara held his gaze, then nodded. Be careful. Silas didn't answer, but he didn't dismiss it either. That mattered. Underscore, 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 underscore. The trail climbed gradually. Snow gave way in patches to exposed rock, where the wind had stripped it clean. Pine branches sagged under the weight, releasing soft showers of powder when disturbed. Silas moved without sound. No wasted steps, no broken rhythm. The higher he climbed, the quieter the world became. Until he wasn't alone anymore, he knew, before he saw him, a presence, still balanced, not hiding, just there. Silas stopped. Didn't reach for his rifle, didn't need to. A figure stood between the trees ahead. Tall, wrapped in worn buckskin and wool, dark hair pulled back, eyes steady. Watching, Chayton Silas said. The man inclined his head slightly. Silas. No surprise. No greeting beyond that. They had never needed more. They stood in silence for a moment. Snow shifted lightly from a branch above. A crow called somewhere in the distance. Then Chayton spoke. You bring new footsteps to your land? Not a question. Silas nodded once. A woman and a child. Chayton studied him, not curious, not judging, just seeing. You found them? Yes. In the snow? Yes. A small pause. Then, and you brought them back? Silas didn't answer. Didn't need to. Chayton's gaze sharpened slightly. 2 winters ago, he said you told me you would not take in anyone again. Silas's jaw tightened once. That was 2 winters ago. Chayton stepped closer, not threatening, not pressing, just closing distance enough to speak without the wind carrying the words away. What changed? Silas looked past him, out over the ridge, snow, sky, distance. Then a child, he said. Chayton nodded slowly. Yes, he understood, because of course he did. They walked together after that, not side by side, not leading, just moving in the same direction, a natural thing, like the mountain itself had decided it. You are watching the valley more, Chayton said after a while. Silas didn't ask how he knew. Someone will come, he said. They always do. Chayton's expression didn't change. But this time you will not be alone. Silas glanced at him. That's not a comfort. Chayton almost smiled. No, he said. It is not meant to be. They reached a small outcrop of rock, sheltered, hidden from the lower trail. Chayton knelt, brushing away a thin layer of snow to reveal a bundle wrapped in oiled hide. He opened it carefully. Inside dried herbs, small tools, bindings, things meant for healing, for the woman, he said. Silas crouched beside him. She's recovering, she is surviving, Chayton corrected gently. That is not the same thing. Silas didn't argue, because he knew. Chayton handed him a small bundle. Boil this, he said. It will warm her blood, help her body remember how to be strong again. Silas took it, nodded once, then hesitated. A rare thing, Chayton noticed, waited. Silas looked down at the bundle in his hands, then said, She's not weak. Chayton's eyes softened. I did not say she was. She walked into that storm, Silas added. With the child? Yes. A pause. That is strength. Silas looked up, and yet Chayton said quietly, She nearly died. The words weren't cruel, weren't dismissive, just true. Strength does not mean you do not fall, Chayton continued. It means you rise again when someone gives you the chance. Silas held his gaze. And you gave her that chance. They stood again. The wind shifted slightly, carrying colder air from the higher ridge. Chayton reached into the bundle once more, pulled out something small, carved, smooth. A piece of wood shaped into a simple figure, not detailed, not decorative, but intentional. For the child, he said. Silas took it, turned it once in his hand. What is it a reminder, Chaitan said, of what that she is not alone in the world. Silas looked at the carving again, then closed his hand around it. They didn't say goodbye. They never did. Chaitan turned first, disappeared between the trees as quietly as he had appeared. Silas stood there for a moment longer, then began the descent. The cabin came into view as the sun dipped low behind the ridge. Light turned gold across the snow, soft, quiet, alive. Smoke rose from the chimney, thin, steady. Silas slowed as he approached, not out of caution, out of something else. Something he didn't name. The door opened before he reached it. Clara stood there, wrapped in a blanket, hair loose around her shoulders, watching. "You're late," she said. Silas stepped onto the porch. Not by much. Her eyes moved over him, checking, without making it obvious. He noticed. "I'm fine," he said. "I didn't ask." A beat. Then I know. Something passed between them then, small but real. Inside the cabin felt different again. Warmer. Not just from the fire, from use, from presence. Lily ran toward him. "Did you see anything?" she asked. Silas crouched slightly, held out the carving. "For you." Her eyes widened. She took it carefully, like it mattered. "Is it a person?" she asked. "Yes." "What does it do?" Silas thought for a second, then said, "It stays." Lily nodded like that made perfect sense, then hugged it to her chest. "Thank you," she said, and ran back to the hearth. Clara watched all of it, didn't interrupt, didn't comment, but she saw. The way Silas had brought something back, not just supplies, not just survival, something softer, something chosen. "Where did you go?" she asked quietly. Silas set the herbs on the table. "North Ridge. That's all, yes." Clara looked at the bundle, then at him, then nodded. She didn't push further. That too mattered. That night the fire burned low and steady. Lily fell asleep quickly, the carved figure still clutched in her hand. Clara sat near the hearth, watching the flames, thinking. Silas stood near the door, as always. But something had changed. The space between them felt smaller, not because they moved closer, but because the distance mattered less. Clara finally spoke. "You didn't have to bring us back." Silas didn't turn. "I know." "You didn't have to let us stay." "I know." A pause. "Then why are we still here?" Silas looked at the fire, at the small shape of the child sleeping near it, at the woman sitting upright despite everything she had carried. Then he said, "Because you're not done yet." Clara's breath caught, just slightly, not enough to break, but enough to feel. "And you think I will be?" she asked. Silas shook his head. "No." A beat. "I think you'll keep going." Silence settled again. But it wasn't empty. Not anymore. Morning came, softer now, not because the mountain had changed, but because the cabin had. The fire no longer struggled to catch. It was already alive before dawn. Clara woke to the sound of wood settling into flame. A quiet crackle, steady, certain. For a moment, she didn't move, didn't open her eyes, just listened. To the fire, to Lily's slow breathing beside her, to the faint sound of movement somewhere in the cabin, boots on wood, careful and measured. Silas. Always up before the light, always moving before the day began. Clara opened her eyes. The room felt warmer. Not just in temperature. In presence? She sat up slowly, no sharp dizziness this time, no collapse waiting just beneath the surface. Her body still ached, but it answered her now. That was new. She found him near the hearth, pouring coffee. Steam rose in thin curls from the tin cup in his hand. He didn't look up when she approached, but he knew she was there. "You're steadier," he said. Clara leaned lightly against the table. "I am." Silas nodded once, as if confirming something he already expected. "You can work today," he added. Clara raised an eyebrow slightly. That wasn't a question. "No." A pause, then "Don't overdo it." That was as close to concern as he came. Clara noticed, didn't smile, but something in her softened anyway. Lily burst awake not long after. She always did, like the world was too interesting to stay asleep through. "Is it morning?" she asked, sitting up fast. Hair tangled, voice bright. It is, Clara said. Lily grinned. Then immediately slid out of bed and padded across the floor straight to Silas. "Can I help today?" she asked. Silas looked down at her. "Considered. You can carry kindling." Lily nodded like she'd just been given the most important job in the world. "I can do that. I know." The routine began, not planned, not spoken, but it formed anyway, naturally, like water finding its path. Silas worked outside, chopping wood, checking the line where the snow had drifted too deep near the fence, moving through the cold like it belonged to him. Clara stayed inside at first, testing her strength, learning the space. She moved through the cabin, slowly touching things, not to change them, to understand them, where he kept food, how he stacked supplies, what he used most, what he ignored. There was no order to it, no system, just survival. Clara exhaled quietly. That she could fix. By midday, the cabin looked different, subtle but clear. Tools grouped together, food stored where it could be reached without searching, water closer to the hearth. Nothing dramatic, nothing disruptive, just easier. Silas noticed when he came in. Of course he did. He noticed everything. He stood just inside the door, snow melting off his boots, eyes moving across the room, taking it in. "You moved things," he said. Clara didn't turn from the hearth. "I organized them." A pause, didn't throw anything away. Silas stepped further inside, set down the wood, looked again. Longer this time. "Then better," he said. Just one word, but it landed. Clara allowed herself the smallest hint of a smile. Lily came in behind him, arms full of kindling, too much. She dropped half of it on the floor, then looked up startled. "I can pick it up," she said quickly. Silas crouched, gathering the pieces with her. "I know," he said. He handed her one. "Carry what you can finish." Lily nodded. "Serious, I will." Clara watched that exchange, the way he corrected her without making her feel small, without taking the task away. She stored that too. The days settled into rhythm. Morning, work, firelight, quiet, repeat. Clara grew stronger, not all at once, not suddenly, but steadily. She could stand longer, move easier, breathe without that tight edge in her chest. She began to take on more, cooking, cleaning, mending small tears in fabric. Each action simple, but each one grounding. She wasn't running. She wasn't surviving moment to moment. She was living, even if only inside these walls. Silas adjusted without speaking. He left heavier tasks undone longer, not abandoning them, just waiting, watching what she would take on, what she wouldn't. He didn't interfere, didn't direct, only stepped in when something truly needed doing. Clara noticed that too, the respect in it, unspoken but clear. Lily became the bridge between them, without knowing it. Without trying, she moved easily between Silas and Clara, talking, asking, laughing, filling the space neither adult quite knew how to fill. One afternoon she followed Silas to the barn, small boots crunching in the snow behind him. He didn't tell her to stop, didn't tell her to go back, just slowed slightly, enough for her to keep up. "What are you doing?" she asked, checking the horses. "Why?" "To make sure they're still there." Lily considered that, then nodded. "That's important." "It is." She walked beside him in silence for a moment. "Then my papa used to check things too." Silas glanced down at her, didn't interrupt. He said, "If you don't check, things can go wrong without you knowing." Silas nodded once. He was right. Lily seemed pleased with that. Inside the cabin, Clara paused when she heard Lily's voice drifting faintly through the wall. Talking, telling stories, sharing pieces of a life that had been taken from her. Clara's hand rested against the table. Still, she didn't go to stop her, didn't call her back. Some things needed to be said, even if they hurt. That evening, the three of them sat closer to the fire than before, not by agreement, just by habit. Lily leaned against Silas without thinking, small, trusting. Her head rested briefly against his arm as she yawned. Silas froze, not visibly, but Clara saw it. The stillness, the awareness. He didn't move her, didn't shift away, just stayed. Let her stay. Lily drifted off like that. Soft, safe. Silas looked down at her, then across the fire to Clara. Something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, not of each other, but of what this was becoming. Clara broke the silence. She trusts you. Silas didn't look away from the child. She shouldn't. Clara shook her head slightly. She should. A pause. She knows the difference. Silas finally looked at her. Between what Clara held his gaze. Between someone who takes and someone who protects. The fire cracked softly between them. Silas didn't answer, but something in his expression shifted. Small, deep. Later that night, after Lily had been moved to bed, Clara remained by the hearth, watching the flames. Silas stood near the door as always. But he didn't stay there long. He stepped closer, not beside her, but closer than before. You should rest, he said. Clara nodded. In a minute? Silence. Then you could have turned us away, she said. I didn't. I know. She looked up at him. But you could have. A long pause. Silas looked at the fire, then said, I've turned people away before. Clara didn't ask, didn't push. She waited. That was enough. Silas continued. Didn't end well. That was all he offered. But it was more than he'd given before. Clara nodded slowly. Then I'm glad you didn't this time. Silas looked at her. Something in his expression not soft, not hard.
Just open. For a moment, then gone. That night Clara lay awake again, but not from fear, not from running, from something else, something quieter, more dangerous. Hope. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the fire, to the wind beyond the walls, to the steady, grounded presence of a man who had not asked her to stay, but had not let her leave. And for the first time since everything had fallen apart, Clara Whitlock allowed herself to think something she had not dared to think before, not even once. Maybe, just maybe, this place was not temporary. The mountain always warned first, not with sound, not with movement, but with a change in feeling. Silas noticed it before sunrise. He stood just outside the cabin, breath slow in the cold air, eyes moving across the tree line without turning his head. Nothing obvious, no figures, no motion, but the horses had shifted in the night. He could see it in the way they stood, now heads slightly higher, bodies angled toward the slope instead of the barn. Listening, waiting, that was enough. Silas stepped back inside, closed the door softly behind him. Clara looked up from the table. She didn't ask what's wrong. She asked, someone's coming, not a question. Silas nodded once. Yes. Lily looked between them, small, still. She didn't speak, but she understood. Children always did. Silas moved through the cabin with quiet precision, not rushing, not panicking, preparing. He checked the rifle, set it within reach, but not in hand. He adjusted the position of the chair near the door, moved nothing dramatically, just enough. Clara watched all of it, then stood, steadier now, stronger than the woman he had carried out of the snow. What do you need me to do? She asked. Silas looked at her, not past her, not around her, at her. Stay inside, he said. Clara didn't move. That's not enough. Silas held her gaze. A long moment. Then if something goes wrong, he said, you take Lily and go out the back. Clara shook her head immediately. No. Silas's voice didn't rise. This isn't a discussion. Clara stepped closer. Not aggressive, not afraid, just firm. I didn't run this far to keep running. Silence. The fire cracked softly behind them. Lily shifted closer to Clara's side. Silas studied her. Something in his expression changed. Not irritation, not anger, recognition. He nodded once, then adjusted. Then you stay behind me. Clara didn't hesitate. I can do that. The knock came just after midday. Not loud, not forceful, but deliberate. 3 slow strikes against the wood. Silas didn't move right away. He looked at Clara. She nodded once. Ready. He opened the door. The man standing outside didn't look like the mountain. That was the first thing Clara noticed. Everything about him was too clean.
Too measured. His coat was dark, well-made, cut for town, not for snow. His boots were good leather, but not worn in the way that came from real distance. And his eyes didn't search. They assessed. Like everything in front of him was already something he owned. Mr. Boone, he said smoothly. Silas didn't answer, didn't invite him in. The man's gaze shifted, past Silas, into the cabin. And then he saw her. Clara felt it. That moment. Recognition. Not surprise, not relief. Satisfaction. "Mrs. Whitlock," he said. Her name sounded wrong in his mouth, like something taken. Clara stepped forward, just enough to be seen clearly. "You've come a long way," she said. The man smiled slightly. "I go where my business requires." Silas shifted, not blocking her, not hiding her, just present. The man noticed that too. "And you are?" he asked. "Silas Boone." A pause, then the man inclined his head slightly. "Edgar Harlan." Silas's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. "I believe Harlan," continued the woman inside your cabin, "is under a legal obligation to return with me." Silas leaned one shoulder lightly against the doorframe. "She's standing here." Harlan smiled faintly. "Yes, she is." His gaze returned to Clara. "You've caused quite a disturbance," he said, "running off the way you did." "I left," Clara said evenly. "You fled." "I chose." A flicker of something crossed his face, gone as quickly as it came. "You took property that does not belong to you. I took what was mine. You misunderstand the situation." Clara held his gaze. "No," she said quietly. "You do." Silence stretched between them, cold, sharp, measured. Harlan took a step forward, not aggressive, but intentional. Silas didn't move, didn't need to. The distance remained exactly the same. That said more than anything else could. Harlan noticed, adjusted.
"You've put this man in a difficult position," he said to Clara. "I didn't ask him to stand there, and yet he is." Clara didn't answer, because that part was true. Harlan shifted his tone, softer now, almost reasonable. "You're tired," he said. "You've been through something unpleasant. That's understandable." Clara didn't react. "You can come back with me," he continued. "We can settle this properly. You and your daughter will be taken care of." Lily's hand tightened in Clara's sleeve, small but firm. Clara rested her hand lightly over it. Grounding, steady. "We are taken care of," she said. Harlan's eyes flicked to Silas, measured, reassessing, then back to her. "This situation is temporary?" Clara shook her head. "No," she said. "It isn't." The wind shifted slightly. Snow drifted across the clearing. Silence deepened. Harlan's voice lost a degree of warmth. "Let me be clear," he said. "You cannot stay here." Clara's chin lifted. "I already am."
Another pause, longer this time. Then Harlan looked at Silas, directly. "You understand," he said, "that harboring someone in her position may bring consequences." Silas didn't blink. "Everything does." Harlan studied him, then asked, "And you're willing to accept that Silas's answer came without delay?" "She stands here," same words, but heavier now, final. Something shifted in Harlan's expression. The calculation changed. This wasn't going the way he expected. He exhaled slowly, then straightened slightly. "Very well," he said. His tone returned to calm, controlled. "I can see this conversation will not resolve matters today." Clara didn't relax, didn't step back, didn't look away. Harlan's gaze lingered on her for one last moment. "Then you will hear from me again," he said. Clara met his eyes. "I know." He turned, walked back across the snow without hurry, without looking back. A man who believed time was on his side. Silas watched until he disappeared beyond the tree line. Only then he closed the door. Inside, the cabin felt different again, the warmth still there, the fire still burning. But something else had entered with that man, something colder than the storm. Lily exhaled shakily. "He's the one," she whispered. Clara nodded. "Yes." Silas moved to the window, looked out, then back at them. "He'll return," he said. Clara didn't argue. "I know." Silas studied her. "You didn't flinch." Clara held his gaze. "I already did that once." A pause. "Not again." Silence settled, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one had weight, expectation, something coming. Clara moved slowly to the table, rested her hand against it, grounded herself, then looked at Silas. "You can still send us away," she said. Silas didn't answer immediately. He walked over, stopped in front of her, close enough now that distance no longer protected either of them. Then he said, "No, just that, nothing more." Clara searched his face. "Why?" she asked. Silas's voice stayed low, even. "Because he expects you to leave." A beat. "You're not going to." Clara felt something tighten in her chest, then settle. "Yes," she said. "I am not." Silas nodded once, then added, "Then neither am I." The fire cracked. The wind pressed softly against the walls, and for the first time the danger didn't feel like something chasing her. It felt like something that had arrived and found her standing. The mountain did not forget. It held memory in the snow, tracks, weight, intent. Silas saw them before dawn. 3 this time, not one, not a visitor. A decision. He stood at the edge of the clearing, rifle resting low in his hands, not raised, not hidden, just present. The sky was still dark blue, the first light barely touching the ridge. Behind him the cabin remained quiet, but not unaware. Inside, Clara was already awake. She had learned the difference between silence and warning. This was not silence. She stepped out of the bedroom slowly. Lily, still asleep, curled tight under the blanket, one hand wrapped around the small carved figure Silas had given her. Clara paused for a moment, watched her, then closed the door halfway. Not fully. Never fully. Silas didn't turn when she stepped into the main room. "You saw them," she said. "Yes." "How many? 3? Clara nodded once. No fear. Not on the surface. But her breath was slower now, measured, prepared. "What do you need?" she asked. Silas glanced at her. This time he didn't say, "Stay inside. Wake the girl," he said. "Keep her in the back room." Clara held his gaze, then nodded. "All right." No argument, no refusal. That was trust. By the time the sun touched the top of the trees, they arrived, not knocking this time, not asking. 3 men stepped into the clearing like they belonged there.
Edgar Harlan at the center, the other 2 slightly behind, spread just enough, professional, controlled. Silas stepped forward, not far, just enough to meet them outside the door. The snow beneath his boots was packed hard now, no slipping, no noise. Harlan stopped a few paces away, looked around the clearing, then at Silas. "You've made your position clear," he said. Silas didn't answer, didn't need to. Harlan's eyes shifted toward the cabin. "She's still here?" "Yes." A pause. "Then this can end." "Simply," Harlan said. Silas waited. "You step aside." Silas didn't move. Inside, Clara stood just behind the door, not hiding, listening, every word, every breath. Her hand rested lightly against the wood, not for support, for grounding. Outside, Harlan exhaled slowly. "You're choosing something that does not concern you." Silas's voice remained low. "It does now." Harlan tilted his head slightly, studying him, reassessing again. "You don't know what she's taken." Silas's jaw shifted once. "I know enough, and that's enough for you to risk this." Silas didn't hesitate. "Yes." One of the men behind Harlan moved slightly. A shift in weight. A test. Silas's rifle lifted. Not fast, not dramatic, just immediate, precise. The man froze. Not from fear, from recognition. This wasn't a bluff. Harlan noticed everything. Of course he did. He raised one hand slightly. "Not surrender. Control. Easy," he said to his men, then back to Silas. "No one needs to make a mistake here." Silas didn't lower the rifle. No one has yet. Inside, Clara closed her eyes for a brief moment. Not in fear, in clarity. She understood this now. This wasn't about force, it was about who would yield first. And Silas did not look like a man who yielded. She stepped forward, opened the door. The cold air rushed in, sharp, clean. Clara stepped onto the porch. Silas didn't turn.
But he shifted slightly, enough to include her, not enough to expose her. Harlan's eyes locked onto her immediately. There it was again, that satisfaction, but weaker now, less certain. "You've made this harder than it needed to be," he said. Clara's voice was calm. It was already hard. "You misunderstand your position." "No," she said. "I understand it very well." She stepped down from the porch, stopped beside Silas. Not behind, beside. That mattered. Everyone saw it. Harlan's gaze flicked between them. That changed things. He adjusted again. "You cannot stay here forever," he said. Clara didn't look at him. "I don't need forever." "Then what do you need?" Clara answered without hesitation. "Time. Silence." Wind moved lightly through the trees. Snow shifted underfoot. Harlan considered that. Really considered it. "Time," he repeated. "Yes. for what Clara met his eyes now, for you to lose. That landed harder than anything else she had said. The man on Harlan's left shifted again, more tense this time. Silas didn't move, but the rifle adjusted just slightly. Enough. The man stopped again. Harlan exhaled. Long, slow. Then he smiled. But it didn't reach his eyes. You believe this man can protect you, he said. Clara didn't answer. Didn't need to. She stood there. That was answer enough. Harlan turned his attention fully to Silas. Do you understand what comes next? He asked. Silas's voice stayed even. Yes. And you still stand here? Yes. A pause. Then Harlan nodded. Once, then we are finished for today. He turned. The two men followed. No rush, no retreat, just withdrawal. Strategic. Temporary. Silas didn't move until they were gone, truly gone, out of sight, out of range. Only then he lowered the rifle. Clara exhaled. Slow. Controlled. Her hands trembled slightly now, not before, now, after. That was how it worked. Silas turned to her. You held, he said. Clara met his gaze. So did you. A beat. Then Silas nodded once. They stood there a moment longer. The mountain quiet again, but not empty, never empty now. Inside, Lily's voice called softly. Mama Clara turned immediately. I'm here, she said. She stepped back into the cabin. Warmth closed around her again. But something had changed. Silas followed, closed the door, set the rifle down. Not far, never far now. Clara knelt beside Lily, took her face gently in her hands. It's all right, she said. Are they gone for now? Lily nodded, held onto her tighter. Clara closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. Steady again. Across the room Silas watched, not intruding, not distant, just there. The same way he had been from the beginning. But now, it meant something different. Clara looked up at him. And in that moment there was no distance left between what they were doing and why. That night came without wind. The mountain rested. No storm, no warning, just stillness. The fire burned low, soft, steady. Shadows moved gently across the cabin walls, no longer sharp, no longer restless. Clara sat near the hearth, not because she had to, because she wanted to. Lily slept in the bed behind her, one arm wrapped around the small carved figure, her breathing slow and even. Safe. Completely safe. Clara watched her for a long moment, then turned her gaze back to the fire. Silas stood near the door, as always, but not as far as before, not watching the outside, watching inside. Neither of them spoke at first. They didn't need to. The silence between them had changed. It no longer felt like distance. It felt like something shared. Clara broke it. Why did you help me? Her voice was quiet, not demanding, not searching for something complicated. Just asking. Silas didn't answer right away. He looked at the fire, then at her, then down at his hands, rough, steady, marked by years of work and solitude. He exhaled slowly, didn't rush the words. I saw you in the snow, he said. Clara waited. That's not why, she said softly. Silas's jaw shifted slightly. He knew that. He looked back at her. Long enough this time that looking away would have meant something. So he didn't. It didn't feel right, he said. To leave you there, simple, unadorned, true. Clara held his gaze, and something in her chest eased. Not because the answer was grand, because it wasn't, because it was real. You didn't know me, she said. Silas nodded. I still don't. A beat. Then you're here anyway. Clara let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh, but softer. You don't ask much, she said. Silas shook his head slightly. No. Silence settled again, but it wasn't empty. It held something now, something steady. Clara looked at the fire, then said, I thought I was just passing through. Silas didn't respond. She continued. I told myself this was temporary. A pause, that I would leave when I could walk far enough. Silas's voice came low. You can walk now. Clara nodded. I can. She looked up at him. But I haven't. That landed. He felt it. Didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there. Clara's fingers rested lightly against her lap. No tension now, no shaking. I kept waiting for it to feel like, before she said, like I needed to keep going. She shook her head slowly. But it doesn't. Silas stepped closer. Not all the way, just enough. Why? Clara met his eyes, because now she knew the answer. Because I'm not running anymore, she said. A beat, and I don't feel alone. Silence, deep, real. The fire shifted. A log settled. A soft crack filled the space. Underscore 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 underscore. Silas looked at her, really looked. Not at the woman he had carried out of the snow, not at someone passing through, at someone who had stayed. You don't have to, he said. Clara frowned slightly. Don't have to what? Stay. The word hung there. Careful, deliberate. Clara studied him. You're giving me a choice now. Silas nodded once. Yes. Clara stood slowly, walked toward him. Not rushed, not hesitant, just certain. She stopped a few steps away, close enough that distance no longer protected either of them. I always had one, she said. Silas didn't argue, because that was true. Clara's voice softened. But this is the first place that felt like I could choose, without losing something. Silas's breath slowed, barely noticeable, but there. Clara looked past him briefly, toward the bed, toward Lily, then back. She sleeps differently here, Clara said. Silas glanced in that direction, then back. She doesn't wake up scared, Clara continued. She doesn't hold on to me like she's about to lose me. A pause. She just sleeps. Silas's voice came low.
That's good, Clara nodded. It is. Another silence, but softer now, warmer. Clara stepped just a little closer. Not touching, not yet. I don't know what comes next, she said, or how long any of this lasts. She held his gaze. But I know what this is. Silas waited. Clara's voice dropped. Steady. Certain. This is the first place that didn't break me. That landed. Deeper than anything else she had said. Silas didn't move, didn't step back, didn't look away. You changed it, he said. Clara shook her head gently. No, a small breath. We did. Silence, but not uncertain, not fragile. The fire burned low. The night deepened. Clara's hand lifted slightly, not reaching, just there. Between them, Silas looked at it, then at her. Then slowly he closed the distance, just enough. His hand brushed hers, rough against soft, warm against warm. No urgency, no claim, just contact, real. Clara didn't pull away, didn't hesitate.
She let her fingers settle against his, light, certain. Neither of them spoke, because nothing needed saying. Behind them, Lily shifted in her sleep, a soft breath, a quiet sound, safe. Silas's grip steadied slightly. Not tighter, just sure. Clara exhaled, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, there was no weight in her chest, no fear pressing behind her ribs, no need to run, just this room, this fire, this man, this moment. She leaned her head slightly, just enough to rest it against his shoulder. Silas didn't move, didn't stiffen, didn't question it. He simply stayed. Outside, the mountain held the night, cold, vast, unforgiving, but inside there was warmth, there was breath, there was something stronger than survival. Clara closed her eyes, and this time she didn't dream of running, she dreamed of staying, and somewhere between the quiet fire and the steady presence beside her. Clara Whitlock understood something she had been too tired, too broken to believe. Before she had not just been saved from the snow, she had been given something far rarer, a place where she could stop, a place where she could breathe, a place where she was not a burden, not a problem, not something to be taken or traded or chased, a place where she was simply wanted. And Silas Boone, the man who had once lived alone in a cabin, built to keep the world out, stood there beside her hand, still lightly holding hers, and understood something too. He had not taken in a broken bride. He had opened a door he thought he had sealed forever, and in doing so he had found the only thing the mountain had never given him, a home.